It's been a long time since I last covered a $400 electric skateboard, and that's because there's been nothing new worth covering at that price point. The vast majority of $400 boards available today from the well-known brands have been largely the same as the $400 boards that came out a couple of years ago. Well, that changes now because Backfire just gave their G2 budget board some significant upgrades, making it perhaps the best value today for an entry-level board. Backfire calls their updated budget board the G2 Black 2020.
Let's go.
Let's go through the different parts of the new board, and I'll tell you why it's my top recommendation for a $400 electric skateboard today. And then I'll tell you about the slightly more expensive G2 Galaxy, which is Backfire's replacement for the G2T. The G2 Black 2020 now has a longer and wider deck. It's 2 cm longer and 1 cm wider than the G2 deck that Backfire had been using since 2017, which many people felt was a little bit small. This deck is somewhat flexy, but more stiff than the deck on Backfire's higher end boards, the G3 and Zealot. For many people, that's a good thing because many feel that the deck on the G3 and Zealot is a little bit too bouncy. A stiffer deck would allow you to ride at higher speeds with more confidence. This deck has a very shallow concave, which makes it more comfortable on longer rides, compared to decks with more aggressive concaves. The trucks on the G2 Black 2020 are imitations of the popular Caliber 2. Just like Caliber trucks, the bushing seats are shaped to give you better stability, which is something you definitely want at higher speeds. These are not perfect clones of the Caliber 2s. The kingpins aren't centered perfectly, and the bushing seats aren't as refined, but I think most people would not feel a difference. For the most part, they behave like Calibers. The G2 Black 2020 comes with 96mm wheels. The most common size for budget boards is 90mm, so these are a little bit bigger and have more urethane to help make the board feel more comfortable. These motors are the 3rd generation electric skateboard hub motors made by Hobbywing. They were quiet before, and now they're even quieter and more powerful. Backfire continues to use electronic speed controllers and remotes made by Hobbywing, which is a solid choice because of how reliable they are and how intuitive the controls are. The new G2 Black uses the latest version of Hobbywing's standard remote, which now includes a telemetry display. It shows you your battery indicators, current speed, speed mode, distance traveled, etc. The control wheel is as simple to use as before. There's a power button and a speed mode button, but there is no reverse switch anymore. To go into reverse, you double tap the speed mode button. Personally, I prefer having a dedicated reverse switch. The remote charges via a USB Type-C port. The G2 Black 2020 is powered by a 10S2P 187 Wh battery. This is a 30% larger capacity than the most common size for budget boards, which is 144 Wh. In other words, with the new G2 Black, you can ride 30% farther than most of the other $400 boards. The battery pack is enclosed in a plastic case instead of shrink wrapped, so instead of looking like a homemade bomb, it looks like a premium bomb. Overall, this is one of the better value batteries that come on an entry-level board. I should point out though that this battery uses unbranded cells, which with most e-skate companies I would consider a big no-no. But this is Backfire we're talking about, so I'm 69% sure that they 100% know what they're doing. On a recent ride in places that had a lot of pedestrians, meaning I had to ride pretty slow, I got about 24 kilometers. That's really high for this battery capacity and my weight. On a more typical ride without pedestrians in the way, I expect to get around 18 kilometers. Lots of things can affect range, so your results may vary. To find out how to estimate range based on the battery capacity and your weight, visit Kwan.com. The G2 Black has a top speed of 38 kilometers per hour in the sport mode, which is more than enough for most people. In eco mode, the top speed is 20 kilometers per hour. Both the acceleration and brakes are adequately strong in both eco mode and sport mode. The main difference between the two modes is the top speed. Unlike most of Backfire's other boards, there's no turbo feature on the G2 Black. But even so, I think there's more than enough power for most beginners. Like most boards that use a 10S2P battery, you can feel the board gradually become weaker as you drain the battery. This is normal for a $400 board, and how much this affects you depends on your weight, how you ride, and your environment. The G2 Black 2020 weighs 7.4 kilograms, which is about average weight for this type of board. You can either carry it in your arm or pull the front truck. An e-skate backpack such as an halter bag can be useful if you need to carry the board for a longer distance. This is especially useful if electric skateboards are not street legal where you live. Backfire's electric skateboards have always had a distinctive aesthetic. The appearance has not changed much since 2017, but that's totally fine because it still looks better than most of the other boards today around the same price. The deck still has a shape that's easily recognizable as Backfire. The battery enclosure actually has design and doesn't look like a bento box. I'm not really a fan of the big logo on the grip tape, but it's not a big deal. Overall, it's still a pretty good looking board. And check this out, a perfect circle for the logo this time. The G2 Black 2020 is undoubtedly one of the best values today for a budget board. But the reality is any other brand can release a board with competitive specs the very next day. In fact, by the time some of you are watching this video, the competitors have probably updated the specs of their budget boards to stay relevant. So if you're looking for a $400 board, why should you get the G2 Black? I'll give you two major reasons. First, most of you watching my videos are in the US, and the board is in stock now in Backfire's Los Angeles warehouse. Shipping is expected to take only 3 to 5 business days. In case you didn't know, shipping for electric skateboards from China to the US for the past few months have been a bit of a nightmare for many e-skate companies and their customers. It's much better now, but I would not describe the situation as stable. So having the boards in stock in the US lets Backfire have much more reliable shipping times. At least until they're out of stock, in which case they'll ship from China instead. Be sure to double check the shipping situation before ordering. The second reason is because Backfire's customer support reputation has been stellar for the past 3 years. Don't take my word for it, check for yourself on Reddit and Facebook groups. You can reach Backfire by phone, email, or online chat, and their online support is available 19 hours a day on business days. I want to especially point something out. Whenever people would ask me what board they should get not for themselves, but as a gift for someone else, I generally recommend that they get something from Backfire. If you're buying something for yourself, you may be willing to take some risk, but if it's a gift, it needs to arrive on time, and you want to make sure the recipient has a good after-sale experience. Backfire meets those requirements. Likewise, if you're not experienced with electric skateboards and they all seem the same to you, I'm very comfortable with suggesting that you get something from Backfire. For most beginners who don't want to invest too much in a hobby they've never tried, I think the G2 Black would be a good choice. It's not too big, not too small, not too fast, not too slow. It's a no-frills but affordable board from arguably the most dependable e-skate company today. There's just one more thing. Before you leave, let me quickly tell you about the new G2 Galaxy. This is Backfire's replacement for the G2T. It's like the new G2 Black, but instead of 187 watt-hours, it has a 216 watt-hour battery. That should get me about 21 kilometers of range. Again, visit dquan.com to find out how to estimate range based on your weight. Instead of unbranded battery cells, the G2 Galaxy uses the reputable Sony VTC6, also in a 10S2P arrangement. And instead of the standard hobby remote, it uses Backfire's remote, which has the turbo button. Turbo gives you additional torque, but drains the battery more quickly. Of course, the best thing about this remote is that it's much better looking. So that's the G2 Galaxy. It's measurably better than the G2 Black, but it's also more expensive. Which one should you get? That's easy. Get the one you can afford.